we are coming to the nitty-gritty of the problem. Yeah. Why all this? Why all this? You see? That is what she has been asking, insisting for the answer. And of course, Narada has come fully prepared to answer all these questions. And we have seen last time how, in various details, she surveys the issue and then pinpoints her questions. And it is those questions which Narada has to answer first before he proceeds further. But okay, let's quickly see what she is asking him, Narad. First thing is, why is it all and where from are we here? Well, that is the basic question. What is the fun in this creation? Is there any purpose? Is there any joy? Is there any objective in achieving something? Is there any at all, you see? If to some being of eternal bliss, it is our spirit's destiny to return, or some still impersonal height of endless calm, since that we are, and out of that we came, since that we are, and out of that we came. Whence rose a strange and sterile interlude, lasting in vain to interminable time. It's a very pertinent question. If God is all, God is in all, we are all in God. I am paraphrasing St. John basically. God in all, God is all, and we are all in God. Then why? Why this interminable interlude? That is the question, you see. In fact, since that we are and out of that we came, it is the echo of the Taittiriya Upanishad. This line is an echo of the Taittiriya Upanishad. From Ananda we come, in Ananda we live, to Ananda we return. We have come from Ananda, we live in Ananda, to Ananda we return. If it is all Ananda, happiness, bliss, joy, then why all this? That is the quintessence of her question, you see. Or if these beings must be and their brief lives, what need had the soul of ignorance and tears? The soul has a need, as if, of this suffering and misery and this anguish. What is the need of the soul? Why soul wants all that? What is it that he wants to experience and gain from that experience? If it is going to be some kind of a gain for the soul, then let me know. Perhaps in that case, I am willing to suffer. If the soul in the long run is going to gain something out of the present suffering, then all that suffering is worthwhile, is serving a purpose. Let me know what that thing you say. I am not aware of it. Whence rose the call for sorrow and for pain? Yes, it is we who have called for sorrow and pain. Or all came helplessly without a cause. If I not call them, they just entered into life. Why? So she is pinpointing now each and every question, you see. What power forced the immortal spirit to birth? The spirit is free, and is there a power which can force that free spirit? Is the freedom of the spirit contingent freedom, dependent upon something, that something else can come and overpower it? Is there a greater power than the spirit, of which we are not aware? And because of that greater power, all these things, the suffering, are happening here. What power forced? She says forced the spirit. helpless. It stood helpless against that power. The eternal witness, once in of eternity, a deathless sojourner, mid transient scene, he camps in life's half-lit obscurity, amid the debris of his thoughts and dreams. This is what he lives here around. You see. What a powerful statement is it. Amid the debris of thoughts and dreams. See. Or who persuaded it to fall from bliss? It. Who persuaded it to fall from bliss? Spirit. She's speaking of the spirit. Immortal spirit, was it persuaded? If it didn't fall, was it persuaded? Fall from bliss. And forfeit its immortal privilege that it had to give for some purpose. You see. Who laid on it the ceaseless will to live, a wanderer in this beautiful, sorrowful world, and bear its load of joy and grief and love? Who? Or if no being watches the works of time, if there is none who has done that thing, if there is no Sakshi, she says witness. No? Eternal witness. Sakshi, just a witness. He is a witness. So she says here, who laid on it ceaseless will to live, a wanderer, or if no being watches, because that witness is there, therefore watches. Yeah, that watches. The works of time, what hard impersonal necessity compel the vain toil of brief living thing. So again, she is going back to the starting question she had put, chance, necessity, free will. Is it that due to necessity it has happened? If it is not all that, then surely it is a great illusion. It is all Maya, Mithya. It is all Maya. This whole world is Maya, Mithya. And the best solution for you lies in walking away from this world. You are living in a dream, walk away from the dream and live in the reality of the supreme reality. Brahman alone is true. The whole world is illusion. That is what Shankara says. You see. She is talking of Shankara now, you see. But where then is the soul's security if the whole thing, even if the spirit can get overpowered by some power and collapses, falls, then what is the security of the soul? If the spirit itself can get fall, then what is the security of the soul? It's poised in the circling, unreal suns, circling, unreal sun, because it's an illusion. Circling, chakra, kala chakra, in the wheel of time. That is what it means. Circling here stands for kala chakra. You keep on revolving again and again in the same rut movement. Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, goes on like that, circling unreal sun. Or else it is a wanderer from its home who strayed into a blind alley of time and chance and finds no issue from a meaningless world. So the poor helpless soul is wandering, and there is no object in front of it, no goal, no destination available for it, you see. Or where begins and ends the illusion? If God is all, Brahman is all, and illusion is a part of that Brahman, then in the totality of Brahman, where does illusion stand? Is it here or is it here? Does it begin here and end here? Like that. She is asking that question. She is very scientific, methodical. See. Perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream. So ultimately, the soul itself becomes a dream, an illusion, a fiction. We call something with their psychic being. We don't know. It's all perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream. Eternal self, a fiction sensed in trance. Some kind of self-absorption is there, and in the self-absorption, what do we see? the self is nothing but a fiction. So these are the basic questions this lady is asking to the sage. She is voicing the earth's concern, the human concern. This is a question which occurs to all of us. Why? Constantly. Why do all that? I mean, there are all kinds of theories, all kinds of recommendations made. Life is brief, enjoy, forget. You don't care about what happens tomorrow, etc. Who bothers about it? The moment is important, you enjoy it and proceed. Then there are other like that. It goes on, you see. So all these questions keep on haunting us if we are a little alert about these matters, you see. And she found the presence of Narad very significant to get answer to the basic issues. He has come all the way from heaven. He is in the palace. So she is exploiting the occasion of his presence and raising all these questions, you see. She's, I mean, none of these questions are finally going to really solve the problem which she is facing. Tomorrow, her daughter's husband is going to die. He may answer all these thousand questions in thousand ways, but that is something which is not going to satisfy her. It is only sort of placating the mind's disturbance. Her mind, she is in a disturbed state. She is passionate like sorrow. It is only to satisfy that aspect that she is asking, and she is asking the answer. And Narad knows that also. See. So, it is in response to that we have the whole big speech by Narad. Maybe he is speaking for 1.5 hours, 2 hours, answering all the aspects. He has raised all these issues and they cannot be disposed of in a short session like that, you see. And of course, he is given the full rope. Go ahead and speak out whatever you want to speak, you see. And these people, the royal host, they are attentive to everything which he is uttering, which is telling, you see. They are attentive to all that. Then, after a silence, Narad made a reply. After a silence, Narad made a reply. After a silence, she has spoken maybe for 20, 25, half an hour or something like that, all that thing. Narad keeps quiet for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. He doesn't immediately come out with the answer, as if he is looking for the answer. The answers are ready in him, but he is not coming out immediately with the answers. After a silence, he says, he is purposely, deliberately holding back the answer for a while. Why? He knows that Savitri's mother is in a terribly disturbed state of mind. And he would like her to kind of get quietened down, so that what he is going to say, she may be able to absorb and receive something out of that. So he allows a psychological break in the whole thing. He keeps quiet, silent, and that silence is a diffusive silence. It spreads peace. The disturbance which is there all around because of her, that gets settled down. And in that silence, he is in fact spreading his peace all around. And in that peace, then the real answer comes. So basically, it is psychologically important. It is, in the terms of occult working, more important. By keeping silence, all which was disturbed is kind of allowed to settle down, and the peace pervades. And when the peace pervades, then the real response can come from that, you see. So he is allowing that silence purposely, you see. Now this line is a wonderful line. Then after a silence, Narad made reply. See, that is the art of poetry. And you can see the full power of poetic art in this line. See, normal poet, an ordinary poet would have simply said, Then after a silence, Narad replied. He would not have said made reply. He would not have said made reply. He would have simply said reply. Narad replied. Now you see, I mean, metrically that line is also acceptable. Then after a silence, Narad made reply is one. Then after a silence, Narad replied. You can see immediately the force which is there, this made reply, is totally gone in replied. It becomes too prosaic. It becomes too prosaic at once, you see. The force which is putting there by that time made, that is the kind of art of the accomplished poet, you see, made reply. It's a very unusual phrase, but that is how it brings out the force of the whole expression, you see. In fact, I have done the scanning of this line. So, by the way, yeah, let me read that. From that we came, to that we go. It is Anando Brahmeti Vajanat Anandas Deva Kalyani Bhutani Jayante Anandena Jatani Jivanti Anandam Prenta Visamishantoji. That is how the Vishya Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad, that we have come from Ananda. He knew bliss for the eternal. For from bliss alone it appears. Are these creatures born and begin born? They live by bliss, and to bliss they go hence and return. That is what the Taittiriya Upanishad, this is what she has paraphrased in that phrase. Now here, then after the silence, Narad made reply. This line will, then after means, see, then after a sigh, you see, the break will be like that. First foot is here, second foot is here, third foot is here, fourth foot is here, and fifth foot is here. That is the iambic. In other words, the first foot is an iamb, second foot is an anapest, short, short, long. Third foot is again an iamb, fourth is an iamb, fifth also is an iamb. Basically, it is that construction in this line. Now, if you don't put that made, still it scans well. It will scan like this now. See, if you put it like that without made, then after a silent reply. See, what this means is, first foot is an am, after is a Pyrrhic, silence, this is a trochee, long short. Silence, Narad is again a trochee. Reply is also a trochee. In other words, in this formation, you get three consecutive trochees. Long short, long short, long short, basically you see. Now, that is a bad poetic technique. Particularly following a Pyrrhic. It is mean the rhythm doesn't flow easily in that case. The reason to avoid that trochee business, so to say, he has put mid. He put that. So the poetic art is very rich in Savitri. Each little nuance is important there. You see, you wrote in the line. You see. So that made is extremely significant. I will say. Not only from the poetic point of view, but also because the force with which the reply comes out, made reply. Simply reply doesn't carry that force. You see. Then he said, then after a silence, Narad made reply. Tuning his lips to earthly sound, he spoke. and something now of the deep sense of weight weighted the fragile hands of mortal speech. It's a very powerful introduction to Narada's speech by the poet. First he says, tuning his lips to earthly sound. Narada is a heavenly sage. He will sing always the celestial song of heaven. But now he is talking here to human beings, to the mortal. He has to speak in their language. He has to tune his speech to their mode of understanding and listening and that kind of a thing. He cannot sing the heavenly song here. He has to sing their song, you see, and yet convey his meaning, you see. Tuning is a very powerful word. Tuning his lips to earthly sound. Again he says earthly. He is not a celestial being now. He is speaking to the human beings. Earthly sound. He spoke. And while he is speaking, something now the deep sense of faith. That is what is emerging out. Why this fate is working here? Why Satyavan has to die? What is the raison d'etre of this death? Something of that he is going to reveal, he is going to tell. The full force which is there. Now, this is important. You see, I mean, how each word is powerful. Something. He says, Narad is speaking, tuning his lips to earthly sound. What will come out will be only something, not the full. What contents are there or there, they cannot get conveyed to them. Therefore, only a certain thing of that comes out in his speech of deep sense of faith. Full sense of faith cannot emerge from it. Means what Narad is going to speak for 2 hours, only it is a deep sense of what is up there he is conveying it. In other words, if he has to speak for a longer time, maybe for a whole day, then a fuller sense might come. We don't know, you see. Something. The poet is very, very particular about all this. Each word is loaded in that sense, you see. Weighted the fragile hands of mortal speech. So after all, mortal speech is there, but it is now loaded with that deep sense of faith. What is the sense of faith? Why Satyavan has to die? In fact, he is not really answering by saying that. Narada is not really answering to all those 100 questions Savitri's mother has raised. He is least concerned about that. In a way, he is now revealing what that fate means here in this creation. He is taking that occasion of her questions to basically bring out the deep sense of fate. It is an occasion. He is sort of prompted, he is supplied that pretext to speak of the deep sense of fate.